Hello, and welcome to kind of an opening to your web soil survey online guidance tools slash resources. What I want to do with this is really kind of focus on your BMP design and soils to get you kind of an idea of what BMPs are really critical to have a soil component, and then also give you an idea of all the BMPs that do have soil components and how that kind of relates to soil survey a little bit. So kind of start off with BMP design and soils. It's really important to know that your soils are going to have a direct effect on a lot of the BMPs. There are certain BMPs that are going to be excluded or will need to be modified depending on the soils that are present on your site. Some really important things that I want to point out with BMPs, really big BMPs that have large soil components that you're really going to need. These are going to be the ones that you want to call a soil scientist for. So you can get some of the information that you need for these things from Web Soil Survey to kind of get you started. But on these are really ones that I recommend that if you look at Web Soil Survey, afterwards you're going to either are required to have soil component done to it, or you maybe should strongly consider having a soil scientist come out. So the one that comes to mind right off the bat is any type of pond that you're putting in, whether that be an irrigation or a waste pond. Those are going to need a full soil investigation throughout the process. With our ag wrap ponds, you're going to have a soil investigation that takes place in two phases. In phase one, the soil scientists would come out and do a few auger borings, and they're also going to overview the soil survey. And so, in that point, they're going to try to figure out where the soil survey, if it's mapped correctly, what soils are present on the site, and then if the conditions are going to be able to support the pond. If that comes back and is looking well, then we'll move on to phase two if funding is approved. At that point, that's when we're going to probably have an excavator come out, and that's when we're going to dig test pits to determine your water table, your clay availability, the bar area, liner needs, and your core trench depth. You're also going to get soil scientists during the construction of these. Some key things to look at when you're looking at ponds on web soil surveys, you really want to look at your clay availability and your water table depths, and you also want to look at if you have any impeding layers that could show up. So that would be like shallow soils, bedrock issues if we're having to dig deep into the soil. And if you have extensive like sandy subsoils, that's going to be when we're needing a liner. So those may be some things that you look at web soil surveys when you're trying to get an idea of whether these ponds are viable. Other really key places that soils are very, very important are going to be for rain gardens and wetlands. So in this, you're going to need site suitability, and really depends a lot on the material that's there. So if we have a clay material with certain hydraulic conductivity is needed to ensure that the area holds water long enough, it's going to be important you have clay soils. Um, in rain gardens, the difference between a clay soil and a sandy soil is going to make a difference in how big that rain garden is. So, for example, a clay soil rain garden usually is going to have to be sized to be about twice the size of a sandy rain garden. Also, with these, a lot of times I recommend having the soil scientists there during construction, especially if the soils are changing a lot or there seems to be a lot of variation, to make sure that we're staying in good material and that the site conditions aren't changing. Because a lot of times when you go out and start digging, just because you dug a hole in XYZ location doesn't mean that if we move, 7 foot away, that the soils hadn't changed drastically, because sometimes that does happen. Feed pads and building pads are one that a lot of times is really important. A lot of times feed pads and building pads can be very straightforward. But if you ever see on your web soil survey when you're looking at soils, you really want to make sure that expansive clays are not going to be present, because we're going to have to plan around those. High water tables are concerned, and also shallow soils can be a problem with feed pad or building pad stuff. And it's really important to recognize what those are ahead of time, because if these things are present, it can hinder the construction. Or in the case of like an expansive clay, it could, if those expand, they could break the concrete during wet periods. And so we really have to be able to plan around those if you see those. Another really important thing is if you're doing a BMP for a spring development or a stream side pickup, those are really key when we're looking at water table. So you really want to kind of get an idea of where the water table is at those sites. You can use Web Soil Survey for this, but this is one that I really do recommend also getting a soil scientist to come out and to reconfirm, just because if you put those in the wrong area and you don't have water like you were expecting, then it can be very costly to go back in and redo these stream side pickups afterwards. Um, as you can kind of see in this picture here, we have 3 different types of streams that are common. You can have a gaining stream, or the water is causing the water level is filling up the river. You can have a losing stream where the river is actually feeding the water table, or you can have something called a disconnected stream where you have water running up on top of the surface, but the water table itself is not connected to the river itself. So you really want to make sure in these cases that you are prepared for either any of these locations ahead of time. You want to make sure. Usually, if I'm doing a stream side pickup, I want that to be in a gaining stream location. You can still do it with the other ones, but it's usually an elevation problem, especially if you're in a lower lying area. Be able to get enough fall to use that stream side pickup if it's not a gaining stream. The other thing that's really key for multiple BMPs is going to be drainage issues. I get called out a lot for drainage issues, and there are a lot of factors that go into drainage issues. Those are going to be compaction, texture, limiting layers, landscape position, a combination of all these things. And sometimes you can see some of these things on your web soil survey. So that's really key. If someone does call about a drainage issue, maybe want to look on web soil survey ahead of time just to get a better idea of what the soils are mapped and get an idea of, oh, well, is the soil mapped there got clay soils and their subsoils, and or maybe it's mapped in a way that's talking about a compaction issue, or maybe it's something to do with its structure, or a limiting layer. Maybe these have shallow soils with bedrock issues. All those things sometimes can pop up on your web soil survey. And if you're going out there and you see that you're able to confirm that is what it's looking like, or if you have questions on whether or not the map and what you're seeing on the ground are the same, that's when you would want to call a soil scientist to come and look at it and try to get an idea of what's going on. So on this slide that I have up here is a table that I want to put up on the website. And so on this table, it's got a list of conservation practices, and this is kind of a living document as we move forward. But this is a list of conservation practices the NRCS has deemed to have some sort of soil concern. And a lot of the soil concerns that you're going to see on here are able to get some of that information from Web Soil Survey. And so this is a really handy document when you're doing any BMP design. And so when you're starting to design your BMP, I really recommend going to this document to see what soil concerns might you have. And so I do have a way to zoom in to make this a little better. So for example, if you're looking at like an access road, there are multiple things here soil-wise on an access road that you're going to want to look at ahead of time. Depth to bedrock, drainage class, your slope, your soil reaction, your engineering properties. All those are things that you can look at and get some idea from Web Soil Survey of what possibly is going to be out there. Again, I want to just reiterate over and over again that when you're using Web Soil Survey, and you're going to hear this in the other slides, you want to always confirm that what Web Soil Survey has mapped in that location is what is actually there. And we'll get more into that in some of the other videos as you look through them, but it's very, very key that you do confirm that the soil survey map unit is what you're seeing on site. If not, if it's not the same thing, then using that information is no longer useful. So just that's very key for soil survey. Again, I will put this on the website, so you will have this at your fingertips, be able to check and see, hey, what are the things I need to be looking at with my BMP? And where can I go to kind of look at this information on Web Soil Survey? And we're going to get into that in later videos. Hopefully this has been kind of helpful for you to get you an idea of what soil issues you should have as a concern. And again, I just want to reiterate, whenever you have any questions or you're concerned at your sites about a soil issue, or about map units matching up, please do not hesitate to call your division soil scientist to come out and look at these sites. That's what we're here for. And we're glad to help out with any of those questions that you have with web soil survey or with confirming stuff on the site.